14 hours. That's all the time Daniel Wright had with his wife after walking out of Holman Correctional Facility. 14 hours between freedom and death. 14 hours between hope and horror. On a cold November morning in 2019, Daniel stepped through those prison gates after serving 5 years for embezzlement. His wife Sarah was waiting for him in the parking lot, tears streaming down her face, arms open wide. She had waited through every visiting day, every collect call, every promise that things would be different when he came home. But by sunrise the next day, Daniel would be lying unconscious on their bedroom floor, and Sarah would be gone, vanished. No note, no explanation. Just an empty house and a secret so devastating that when police finally uncovered it, even the hardened detectives couldn't hide their shock. What happened in those 14 hours? What did Sarah discover that made her flee into the night, leaving behind everything she knew? And what really happened to Daniel behind those prison walls that no one was supposed to know about? This isn't just a story about a failed marriage. This is about medical experimentation, institutional cruelty, and a cover-up that reached the highest levels of the Alabama Department of Corrections. Before we go any further, I need you to ask yourself something. If you discovered that the person you loved most in this world had been permanently altered without their consent, would you stay? Would you run? Keep that question in mind as we uncover what really happened to Daniel Wright. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why Sarah made the choice she did. Welcome to Silent Witness True Crime Stories. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe and also download your free ebook by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Montgomery, Alabama. A city where everyone knows everyone, where church attendance is still the social norm, and where reputations matter more than money. This is where Daniel and Sarah Wright built their life together. They met in 2009 at Riverside Baptist Church. Daniel was 26, working as the youth outreach coordinator. Sarah was 24, a pediatric nurse at Jackson Hospital. Friends described them as that couple, the ones who seemed genuinely happy, the ones who held hands during service and volunteered together at the food bank every Saturday. Daniel wasn't just popular at church, he was beloved. Kids gravitated toward him. Parents trusted him. Pastor Jim Henderson, who officiated their wedding in 2011, would later tell investigators that Daniel had a gift for connecting with troubled youth, kids who had been written off by everyone else. Sarah was quieter, more reserved. Co-workers at the hospital described her as dedicated, compassionate, someone who would stay late to comfort a scared child even after her shift ended. She didn't need to be the center of attention. She just needed to help people. And she believed in Daniel completely. Believed in his mission. Believed in his goodness. Believed that together they could make a real difference in their community. For 3 years, life was exactly what they'd hoped for. A small house on Maple Street, weekend barbecues with friends, talk of starting a family. But underneath the surface, something was unraveling. Daniel had a secret. A gambling addiction that started innocently enough with fantasy football leagues and occasional trips to the casino. But by 2013, he was driving to Biloxi every weekend, lying to Sarah about church conferences and youth retreats. The debts piled up quickly. First it was credit cards maxed out in his name only, then payday loans, then something much worse. In March 2014, an internal audit at Riverside Baptist revealed that $63,000 had been diverted from the youth ministry fund over 18 months. The money had been transferred in small increments, $500 here, $1,000 there, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. Every transaction was authorized by Daniel's login credentials. When confronted by church leadership, Daniel broke down. He admitted everything. The gambling, the lies, the theft. He begged for forgiveness, promised to pay it all back, swore he would get help. But Pastor Henderson had no choice. He called the police. The arrest made front-page news in the Montgomery Advertiser. Youth pastor embezzles church funds to feed gambling addiction. The community was shattered. Parents who had trusted Daniel with their children felt betrayed. Church members who had contributed to that fund felt violated. And Sarah felt like her entire world had collapsed. But she didn't leave him. Even when friends told her she should, even when her family begged her to file for divorce, she showed up to every court hearing. She visited him in county jail before sentencing. She held his hand through it all and told him the same thing every time. "I forgive you. I'll wait for you. Just come back to me clean." In October 2014, Daniel was sentenced to 6 years in Holman Correctional Facility with the possibility of parole after 5. The judge noted his lack of prior criminal record and his evident remorse, but emphasized that the breach of trust was too severe to warrant leniency. Sarah watched from the gallery as they led him away in handcuffs. She didn't cry. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. That image would haunt her for years, the last time she saw her husband as a whole man. 5 years, 1,826 days. That's how long Sarah waited. She never missed a visiting day, not once. Every Saturday morning she would drive the 93 miles from Montgomery to Atmore, park in the cracked asphalt lot outside Holman, and endure the humiliating security process just to sit across from Daniel for 2 hours in a crowded visitation room that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. In the beginning, Daniel seemed optimistic. He talked about the classes he was taking, the anger management therapy, the substance abuse counseling. He told her he was reading the Bible again, attending chapel services, trying to become the man she deserved. Sarah held on to those words like a lifeline. She took extra shifts at the hospital to pay off his legal fees and restitution. She moved into a smaller apartment to save money. She stopped going to church because the stares and whispers became unbearable. Her entire life became about waiting for phone calls, waiting for letters, waiting for the day Daniel would come home and they could start over. But somewhere around year 3, something changed. The letters became shorter, the phone calls less frequent. During visits, Daniel seemed distant, distracted. He stopped making eye contact. His body language shifted. He would flinch if she reached across the table to touch his hand. Sarah asked him repeatedly if something was wrong. He always said the same thing. "I'm fine. Prison is hard. I'm just tired." But she knew it was more than that. In August 2018, Sarah received a letter that terrified her. Daniel's handwriting was shaky, almost illegible. The message was brief. "Something is happening to me. I don't know how to explain it. I'm scared. Please don't ask me about this during visits. Just know that I love you." That was it. No details, no follow-up. Sarah tried calling the prison administration to ask if Daniel had been involved in any incidents, if he needed medical attention, if there was anything she should know. She was told that all inmate information was confidential, and that if there were any serious concerns, she would be notified by the facility. She wasn't. For the next 14 months, Sarah lived with a gnawing anxiety that something terrible was happening to her husband, and she was powerless to stop it. She consulted a lawyer about filing a welfare check request. She contacted prisoners' rights advocacy groups. She even reached out to a local investigative journalist who had written about conditions at Holman. No one could help her, or no one would. The closer Daniel got to his release date, the more withdrawn he became. His last few letters were almost robotic. Logistical updates about his parole hearing, requests for her to have the house ready, promises that everything would be okay once he got out. But Sarah could read between the lines. Daniel was terrified of coming home, and she had no idea why. On November 12, 2019, Daniel's parole was approved. He would be released on November 18th at 8 in the morning. Sarah took the week off work. She cleaned the house from top to bottom. She bought new clothes for him because everything he owned from before was either outdated or worn out. She stocked the fridge with his favorite foods. She even framed a photo of them from their wedding day and placed it on the nightstand. She wanted everything to be perfect. She wanted him to feel safe, loved home. But the night before his release, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every visit, every phone call, every strange moment over the past 5 years. And for the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that the man coming home tomorrow might not be the man she married. November 18th, 2019. 8:17 in the morning. Sarah pulled into the visitor parking lot at Holman Correctional Facility 30 minutes early. She sat in her car with the engine running, heater on, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She watched the main gate, watched the guards, watched the clock. At exactly 8:32, the gate buzzed open and Daniel walked out. He was wearing the same clothes he'd been arrested in 5 years earlier. Dark jeans, a gray hoodie, white sneakers. They didn't fit right anymore. He'd lost weight, a lot of weight. His face was gaunt, hollow. His eyes scanned the parking lot like he was expecting something bad to happen. When he saw Sarah, he froze, just stood there staring at her through the windshield. Sarah got out of the car. She didn't run to him like she'd imagined 1,000 times. Something about the way he was looking at her made her slow down. They met halfway across the parking lot. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sarah stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Daniel didn't hug her back, not right away. His body was rigid, tense. Finally, his arms came up and he held her loosely, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to. Sarah pulled back and looked at his face. She tried to smile. "I missed you." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "I missed you too." The drive back to Montgomery was quiet. Sarah tried to fill the silence with small talk, told him about the new coffee shop downtown, asked if he wanted to stop anywhere. Daniel just stared out the window. He didn't ask about her job, didn't ask about their families, didn't ask about anything. Sarah's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. When they got to the house, Daniel stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. "It's smaller than I remembered." Sarah laughed nervously. "Same house. You've just been gone a while." Daniel walked through the room slowly, like he was cataloging everything. He stopped in front of the framed wedding photo on the nightstand. He picked it up, stared at it, then set it face down. Sarah felt a chill run through her. "Hey, are you okay?" Daniel turned to look at her. His eyes were empty. "I don't know." That was the most honest thing he'd said all morning. By noon, Sarah had made lunch. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, Daniel's favorite. He ate mechanically, without tasting. Sarah watched him across the table. She wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, but didn't know where to start. So she started with the simplest one. "What do you want to do today?" Daniel looked up at her. "Sleep. That's all I want to do." Sarah nodded. "Okay, that's okay. You've been through a lot." Daniel stood up, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door. Sarah sat at the kitchen table alone, fighting the urge to cry. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She told herself it was just adjustment, that he needed time, that things would get better. But deep down, she knew something was very, very wrong. Daniel slept until almost 6 in the evening. When he finally emerged from the bedroom, Sarah was on the couch watching TV. He sat down next to her, but kept a careful distance between them. They watched in silence for a while. Then Sarah reached over and took his hand. Daniel pulled away. Sarah turned to look at him. "Why won't you let me touch you?" Daniel stared at the floor. "I'm sorry, I just need time." "Time for what?" Daniel stood up abruptly. "I'm going to take a shower." He disappeared into the bathroom before Sarah could respond. She heard the water running. Then she heard something else. Crying. Muffled, broken sobs. Sarah stood outside the bathroom door with her hand on the knob, tears streaming down her own face, not knowing whether to go in or give him space. She chose space. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, he was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. His hair was still wet. He wouldn't look at her. Sarah followed him back into the bedroom. "We need to talk." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. "I know." "Then talk to me. Please." Daniel's hands were shaking. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "They did something to me." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Daniel covered his face with his hands. "In prison. They did something to me." Sarah sat down next to him. Her voice was barely audible. "What did they do?" Daniel shook his head. I can't talk about it. You have to. I'm your wife." Daniel finally looked at her. His eyes were red, swollen. "I signed something, a consent form. They said it was for a medical study, that it would help with anger issues, impulse control. They said it was voluntary. They said it was safe." Sarah's heart was pounding. What kind of study? Daniel stood up and walked to his duffel bag in the corner. He pulled out a large manila envelope and handed it to Sarah. "Read it. Then you'll understand." Sarah opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a stack of medical documents, intake forms, lab results, consent waivers, and one page that made her blood run cold. A surgical report dated March 2017, 2 years into Daniel's sentence. The procedure was listed as chemical castration with supplementary penile reduction surgery. Sarah read the words again, and again. She looked up at Daniel. He was standing across the room with his back to her, shoulders shaking. "Oh my God." "Daniel." Daniel's voice was hollow. "They told me it would help, that it would make me less aggressive, less likely to reoffend. They said it was reversible. They lied." Sarah couldn't breathe. She looked back at the documents. There were follow-up reports, hormone panels, psychiatric evaluations, notes from the prison physician describing side effects, depression, loss of identity, suicidal ideation. This is illegal. This has to be illegal. Daniel turned around. His face was wet with tears. "I signed the papers. They made it legal. You were coerced. You didn't know what you were agreeing to." Daniel sat down on the floor with his back against the wall. "I didn't, but I signed anyway because they told me it would help me get paroled, that inmates who participated in the program were flagged as low risk. So I did it. I let them do it. And now I'm not even a man anymore." Sarah dropped the papers and knelt down in front of him. "You are a man. You're my husband." Daniel looked at her with so much pain in his eyes that she almost looked away. "No, I'm not. Not anymore. I can't be a husband to you. I can't give you kids. I can't even feel like myself. I'm nothing." Sarah reached for him, but he pushed her away. "Don't. Please don't touch me. I can't handle it." Sarah sat back on her heels, tears pouring down her face. "What do you want me to do?" Daniel's voice cracked. "I want you to leave me. I want you to forget I exist. I want you to find someone who can actually be what you need. Because I can't. I'll never be able to." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." Daniel looked at her with something close to anger. "You should. You should run as far away from me as you can. Because I'm broken, and I'm never going to be fixed." They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Did anyone else know about this?" Daniel wiped his face. "A few guys, the ones who were in the program with me, but we weren't allowed to talk about it. They monitored everything. If you said anything, you lost privileges. Or worse." Sarah felt rage building in her chest. "We're going to fight this. We're going to sue the state. We're going to make sure everyone knows what they did to you." Daniel laughed bitterly. "With what money? What lawyer is going to take on the Department of Corrections? And even if they did, do you really want the whole world to know what happened to me? Do you want people staring at me, pitying me, treating me like a freak?" Sarah didn't have an answer, because he was right. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was a public humiliation waiting to happen. And Daniel had already been humiliated enough. Sarah stood up slowly. "I need some air." She walked out of the bedroom, grabbed her keys, and left the house. She didn't know where she was going. She just drove. Through empty streets, past closed shops, under streetlights that flickered like dying stars. She pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there with the engine idling, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. "How's Daniel? How's the reunion?" Sarah stared at the message. She didn't reply. She turned off her phone. She sat in that parking lot for 2 hours trying to process what she'd just learned. The man she loved had been medically mutilated by the system that was supposed to rehabilitate him, and there was nothing she could do about it. When she finally drove back home, it was almost midnight. The house was dark. Sarah walked inside quietly. The bedroom door was still closed. She opened it slowly. Daniel was lying on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. "Did you leave?" Sarah shook her head. "No, I just needed to think." Daniel didn't move. And I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." Daniel finally looked at her. "Then go. I mean it. Just go." Sarah felt something inside her break. She walked over to the bed, sat down, and took Daniel's hand. He tried to pull away, but she held on tight. "I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight." Daniel closed his eyes. "You will eventually. Everyone does." Sarah woke up at 3 in the morning. Daniel wasn't in bed. She found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table in the dark. There was a bottle of whiskey in front of him, half empty. "Where did you get that?" Daniel didn't look at her. "I had someone buy it for me before I got out." "You shouldn't be drinking." Daniel poured another glass. "Yeah, I probably shouldn't do a lot of things. But here we are." His words were slurred. "How much have you had?" "Enough." Sarah reached for the bottle. Daniel grabbed her wrist. Not hard, but firm. "Don't." Sarah pulled her hand back. "Talk to me." Daniel drank the whiskey in one gulp. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That I hate myself? That I wish I'd never been born? Because all of that's true." Sarah felt tears welling up again. "I want you to tell me how we move forward." Daniel laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "We don't. There is no forward. There's just this." He gestured at himself. A broken man sitting in the dark, drinking himself to death. And you watching it happen. Is that what you want? To die? Daniel looked her straight in the eye. Every single day. Sarah stood up. Her voice was shaking. "Then why did you agree to parole? Why didn't you just stay in there if you're so determined to give up?" Daniel stood up too. "Because I wanted to see you one more time. I wanted to tell you the truth. And I wanted to give you permission to leave." Sarah's voice broke. "I don't need your permission." Daniel nodded. "I know, but you have it anyway." They stood there in the dark kitchen staring at each other. And in that moment, Sarah realized something. She couldn't save him. She couldn't fix him. She couldn't undo what had been done. And maybe Daniel didn't want to be saved. Maybe he wanted to be left alone to self-destruct in peace. Sarah turned and walked back to the bedroom. She lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling just like Daniel had hours earlier. She heard him stumble into the living room, heard him collapse onto the couch, heard the TV turn on. Some late-night infomercial. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time she drifted off, she saw those medical documents, those clinical detached descriptions of what had been done to her husband. By 7 in the morning, Sarah got up. Daniel was passed out on the couch, still dressed, the whiskey bottle on the floor beside him. She stood there looking at him. This man who used to lead worship services, this man who used to make kids laugh, this man who used to hold her like she was the only thing that mattered. Now he was just a shell, and she didn't know if there was anything left inside worth saving. Sarah went into the bedroom, pulled out a suitcase, and started packing. She moved quickly, methodically. Clothes, toiletries, medications, laptop, important documents. She didn't pack everything, just enough to leave. She didn't know where she was going yet. She just knew she couldn't stay. Not like this. Not watching him destroy himself. She zipped up the suitcase and carried it to the front door. Then she walked back into the living room and looked at Daniel one more time. She thought about waking him, thought about saying goodbye. But what would she say? "I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough. I'm sorry I can't watch you die." So she didn't say anything. She just left, closed the door quietly behind her, loaded the suitcase into her car, and drove away. It was 8:43 in the morning, 14 hours and 11 minutes since Daniel had walked out of prison. By the time he woke up 3 hours later, Sarah was already gone, and she would never see him alive again. At 12:15, Daniel woke up on the couch with a splitting headache and an empty house. He called Sarah's phone. It went straight to voicemail. He texted her. No response. He walked through the house calling her name even though he knew she wasn't there. The suitcase was gone from the closet. Her car keys were gone from the hook by the door. She'd left him, just like he told her to, just like he knew she would. Daniel sat back down on the couch. He picked up the whiskey bottle. It was empty. He threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall. Then he put his head in his hands and screamed, a raw, guttural sound that no one heard because there was no one left to hear it. For the next few hours, Daniel couldn't think straight. He paced through the house, punched the wall until his knuckles bled, and finally did something he'd been thinking about since the day of the surgery. He went into the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. Sarah's old prescription bottles were still there. Painkillers from a dental surgery 2 years ago, sleeping pills from when her insomnia was bad, anxiety medication she never finished. Daniel emptied all of them into his hand. He stared at the pills, thought about how easy it would be, how quick, how final. Then he thought about Sarah, about how she'd blame herself, about how she'd spend the rest of her life wondering if she could have stopped him. And he put the pills back, because even in his darkest moment, he couldn't do that to her. Daniel sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. Then something shifted inside him. If he couldn't save himself, maybe he could save someone else. He grabbed the manila envelope from the nightstand and pulled out his phone. He took photos of every document, every waiver, every surgical report, every follow-up note. He drafted an email to the Southern Poverty Law Center, attached the photos, wrote a brief summary, then hit send. It was 7:34 in the evening. Within minutes, his phone buzzed. A confirmation email. Someone had received his message. Someone was listening. Daniel felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe this would matter. Maybe other men wouldn't have to go through what he went through. Maybe his suffering could mean something. But that hope was short-lived. By 8:15, Daniel started feeling strange. Dizzy, nauseous, his heart racing. He thought maybe it was just the alcohol from the night before. But it got worse. Fast. By 8:45, he couldn't stand without feeling like he was going to pass out. He stumbled to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. His pupils were dilated, his skin pale and clammy. Something was very wrong. He reached for his phone to call 911, but before he could dial, everything went black. At 9:37, a neighbor named Patricia Collins called 911. She'd heard a loud crash from Daniel's house. When officers arrived at 9:52, they found the front door unlocked. Inside, they found Daniel unconscious on the bathroom floor. Paramedics were called. Daniel was transported to Jackson Hospital. He was barely breathing. His heart rate was erratic. Toxicology screens were ordered immediately. By 11 that night, the results came back. Daniel had a lethal combination of benzodiazepines and alcohol in his system. But here's the thing. Daniel hadn't taken any pills. He'd thought about it, but he'd put them back. So where did the drugs come from? Detective Laura Chen was assigned to the case. She arrived at the hospital at midnight and immediately started piecing together the timeline. Daniel had been released from prison at 8:30 the previous morning. By 8:43, Sarah had left. Between noon and 4:30, Daniel had been alone. After 6, Daniel was alone again until he collapsed. Detective Chen requested surveillance footage from nearby businesses. Most had nothing useful, but a gas station 2 blocks away had a camera pointed at the street. The footage showed Sarah's car leaving at 8:43, and it showed one other vehicle, a dark sedan with tinted windows. It pulled up in front of Daniel's house at 7:15. 2 men got out. They were inside for less than 10 minutes. Then they left. Detective Chen froze the frame, enhanced the image, ran the license plate. The car was registered to a private security firm, the kind of firm that does off-the-books work for people who don't want their hands dirty. Detective Chen made a phone call. Within an hour, she had a warrant. By the next morning, she had 2 men in custody, and the truth started to come out. The men worked for a contractor hired by the Alabama Department of Corrections. Their job was simple: monitor parolees from the experimental rehabilitation program, make sure they didn't talk, make sure they didn't cause problems, and if they did, make sure the problem went away. Daniel had sent that email to the Southern Poverty Law Center at 7:34. By 7:45, the Department of Corrections had been alerted. By 7:50, the order had been given. By 8:15, Daniel was unconscious. It wasn't supposed to kill him, just incapacitate him long enough to retrieve the documents and scrub his devices. But they miscalculated the dosage. Or maybe they didn't. Detective Chen presented the evidence to the district attorney. Within days, the case became a media firestorm. Local news, national news, congressional inquiries. The Alabama Department of Corrections issued a statement denying any involvement in unauthorized medical experimentation. They claimed the rehabilitation program was fully voluntary and had been discontinued years earlier. They were lying, and Detective Chen was going to prove it. Daniel survived. Barely. He spent 2 weeks in the ICU before regaining consciousness. When he woke up, Detective Chen was there. She told him everything. About the men who broke into his house, about the drugs they gave him, about the cover-up. Daniel listened in silence. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Did Sarah know? Detective Chen shook her head. No, she had nothing to do with this. She's been trying to see you, but the hospital had you under protective custody. Daniel closed his eyes. I need to talk to her. Sarah arrived at the hospital that afternoon. She walked into Daniel's room slowly, like she was afraid he'd disappear if she moved too fast. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Sarah started crying. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have left. I should have stayed. Daniel shook his head. No. You should have left. You did the right thing. Sarah sat down beside the bed. What they did to you, what they tried to do, it's unforgivable. Daniel reached for her hand. She took it. I sent those documents to a lawyer, to journalists, to anyone who would listen. I don't know if it'll change anything, but at least people will know. Sarah squeezed his hand. You're brave. Daniel laughed weakly. No, I'm not. I'm just tired of being afraid. Over the next 3 months, the case exploded. Investigative reporters uncovered records of dozens of men who had been subjected to the same program. Some had died by overdose. Some had taken their own lives. Some had simply disappeared after release. None of them had received informed consent. None of them had been told about the irreversible effects, and none of them had been compensated or offered any kind of follow-up care. The Alabama Department of Corrections tried to bury it, but it was too late. Federal investigators got involved. The program was shut down officially. The director of the Corrections Department resigned. The prison doctor who administered the procedures fled the state, and Daniel became the face of a lawsuit that would eventually reach the Supreme Court. But legal victories don't heal trauma, and Daniel was still broken. He and Sarah tried to rebuild. They went to therapy. They talked about the future. They even talked about adoption. But the distance between them never fully closed. Not because Sarah didn't love him, but because Daniel couldn't love himself. And you can't build a marriage on one person's love. In April 2021, they divorced. It was amicable, sad, but necessary. Sarah told him she would always care about him, that she didn't regret waiting, that she just couldn't keep watching him suffer. Daniel told her he understood, that he wanted her to be happy, that he hoped she'd find someone who could give her the life she deserved. They hugged in the courthouse parking lot, and then they went their separate ways. Daniel Wright is still alive. He lives in a small town in Tennessee now. He works at a nonprofit that advocates for prisoners' rights. He's written a book about his experience. He gives talks at universities. He's found purpose, but he's never found peace. Sarah remarried in 2023. She's a nurse practitioner now. She has a daughter. She's happy. Or as happy as someone can be after living through what she lived through. They don't talk anymore. Not because there's anger, but because sometimes the only way to move forward is to let go completely. The men who broke into Daniel's house were convicted of assault and conspiracy. They served 18 months. The contractor who hired them was never charged. The Alabama Department of Corrections paid out a settlement to Daniel and 11 other men. The amount was undisclosed. The program officially never existed. And that's the part that haunts me most. Not that it happened, but that it's still happening, in different forms, in different facilities, under different names. Medical experimentation on incarcerated people isn't new. It's been happening for over a century, and it's still happening now. Because we've decided as a society that prisoners aren't fully human, that they don't deserve autonomy, that their bodies are expendable in the name of research or punishment or control. Daniel Wright's story isn't an anomaly, it's a warning. 14 hours. That's how long it took for Sarah to realize the man she loved was gone. And that's how long it took for the system that destroyed him to try to finish the job. If this story made you angry, good. It should. If it made you uncomfortable, even better. Because comfort is what allows these things to continue. So here's my question for you. What would you do? If the person you loved came home and told you they'd been medically altered without real consent, would you stay? Would you fight? Would you run? How would you feel if you were in Sarah's position, standing in that bedroom, reading those documents? How would you feel if you were Daniel, carrying that shame, that loss, that violation? Let me know in the comments. And if you think this kind of thing can't happen anymore, think again. Because somewhere right now, someone is signing a piece of paper they don't fully understand, and their life is about to change forever. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this.